Folks, I am, I am here and ready, and I am so glad that you all are here. Just to warn you, prepare you, this is going to be highly interactive. I'm looking for a conversation here. I do a lot of sharing of myself and where I'm at and how I'm doing, and you're welcome to do that in the chat as well. We have a great group here. Should be some really good conversation. So just so you know a little bit about me, I work in a community college system in Colorado. So I'm coming to you from Colorado today. And I have a degree in education. I have a master's in human resources management / organizational performance and training. And I promise you, this topic we're talking about today, I know all about it from the depths of my soul. If you read my introduction on any of the websites where you signed up or anything, it talks about working 90-hour work weeks and nonprofit. And I'm telling you, that was a reality I lived for a very long time. And had to learn the really hard lesson of some of the things we're going to talk about today, but life has been so good. And also, it is an ongoing time, an ongoing lesson, an ongoing implementation of setting boundaries and doing self-care and managing my stress. And I had to relearn it last semester. I was very busy, overly busy, lots of life things, not intentional. I just end up taking on too much. And I'm telling you, as I talk to you today, I'm reminding myself of the things I have to continue to work on. So solidarity with you. We're going to be in this together, and I really hope to hear from you in the chat as we go along. Let's get started. Today, why are you here? Oh, before I say this, let me just let you know, when I look over here, this is me looking at you on my screen. Okay, I promise I'm paying attention to you all. And right now I have the chat in front of me, but I might move it over here. So anytime you see me over here, it's because I'm looking at your faces, I'm reading the chat. I'm really good about seeing the chat and all the things. So if you say something and I don't see it in the chat, feel free to unmute yourself. If you're like, Jen, I am so not cool with talking out loud, I get it. No worries. Put it in the chat. I promise I will get to it. So let's talk about what we're doing today. We're going to discuss why you're here. And so while I'm going through the rest of the agenda in the chat, tell me why you're here. Clearly, this is important to you. You've taken time out of your busy schedule, maybe your lunch break, to jump on here with me. Love that. Tell me what brought you here today. Is it the managing stress? Is it learning about what is boundary? What are boundaries? What does that mean? Is it self-care? Is it life is too much? What is it? Is it just, I just need a gentle reminder, Jen? Whatever it is, tell me in the chat. You didn't know this when you came in here, but you're going to be taking a quiz today. Boop. Okay, I promise it's low stress. Okay, do not fret. We're going to learn about stress and its impact all the way around. And then we're going to talk about strategies to help combat stress. And this is going to be pretty centered around work life, but you can absolutely make connections for yourself around your home life and personal life because it applies across the board. And then you're going to have a little bit of time at the end to start creating an intentional self-care plan. And you have a couple of tools that I've included in the PowerPoint. So it's worth downloading because it has, I intentionally kept good, solid information on the slides so that you could use it as a reference in the future. Okay. All right. So I'm looking at the chat. You're telling me why you're here today. And I am looking, let's see, what do I have? The hard time saying no. So boundaries. Yes. Yes, because some of us are people pleasers, or we like to do a good job, or we like to, feel a part of the group or feel important. That's all good. To learn better boundaries at work and become more comfortable saying no, good. And we'll actually talk about language today. People are like, do this thing, but then you're like, but how do I do it? Like, what do I say? How do I approach it? We're going to talk about that today too. I'm a big fan of having like actionable steps that we can do to make things better. Let's see what else. Learning boundaries. I can always learn more about self-care. Yes. Struggle with stress and anxiety. Hey, solidarity. Anytime you read something that somebody else has said, you are welcome to put in the chat. Solidarity. Me too. I got it. I'm with you. I have great boundaries outside of work. When it comes to things in the office, I struggle. I bet that is a very common thread for most of us here, that in one situation, we're really good about setting boundaries or saying no, or even self-care, but in other avenues of our life, it's a real struggle. So that's very normal. Self-care for myself and encouraging others. Simplify and balance is my life goal. I take on too much. Yes, I love it. I love that you're here. I love that so many of you know why you're here. And maybe you're just like, Jen, I'm just here to chill. That's cool. That's okay. I will say that learning and growth and change only comes through intentionality. So if you're here like, I really want to learn and grow, unfortunately, you're going to have to be intentional, intentionally engaged in the conversation, intentionally listening to others in this conversation, and then intentionally taking the action steps and implementing them. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we go. All right, let's jump into it. Quiz time. So before you do it, let's just talk about it because maybe you have the PowerPoint opened up. Don't take the quiz yet. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So this quiz is called the Social Readjustment Rating Scale. It's by Holmes and Ray. They were psychologists from the 1960s. And basically, they decided to study the link between stress and illness. They examined the medical records of more than 5,000 patients, and then specifically focused in on 43 common life events that would cause the most stress. And they asked people which of these events, called life change units, are on this list. And I'm not expecting you to be able to read this list. I know that it's blurry. That's okay. You're going to go to the link and you'll be able to see things clearly there. But ask these people, how many of these life change events have you experienced in the last 2 years? And then that allowed these psychologists, Holmes and Ray, to work out like the relative weights of what each life event would weigh in this list. And then it also showed them at what point someone's combined stress load, so all the points from each of these events put together, was likely to put them at risk. So you're going to go through this list and you're going to, in the website, you're going to take the quiz. It should add it up for you automatically and tell you what your score is. And you're only answering from the last 2 years, only answering from the last 2 years. But let me give a caveat first. This is a moment, a blip in time for you, right? Every quiz, every assessment, every personality test, everything we do, they're not the be all end all, right? You're not going to be take this and be like, oh my God, this is my answer for everything. No, it is a moment for you to start doing some self-assessment, some internal assessment of like, hey, where am I at? How stressed am I? Or I know I'm really stressed. And a couple things might happen. The answer, the number that you come up with might completely correlate and be like, I'm in the 500s, and yes, my stress is very high. But that doesn't always happen because sometimes maybe you have something that is incredibly stressful to you right now that's not even on this list. It's not even taking that into account. Or maybe something on this list, you're like, this isn't stressful to me at all. Maybe one of the things on here is holidays. As being a stressful event, but maybe you love the holidays. They're not stressful at all to you. It's the best time of your year. That's okay. Again, this is a moment as you're going through the list being like, yeah, this is more stressful to me than what they're giving it, or this is less. That's exactly what you should be doing. So this isn't going to give you a finalized answer. It's just a moment in time to kind of start evaluating where you're at. So I'm going to put the link in the chat.
I put it in for you, Jen.
Oh, look at you, Mary. Thank you. So go ahead and
Jen,
oh, yes.
I just need to say something. Lindsay, I don't think you realize your video is turned off. So Lindsay, if you turn on your video, that would be great.
All right, so you only need a couple of minutes. It is 12:15. Go ahead and take 3 minutes. We'll come back at 12:18 and we'll get started on this, having the discussion. So take the 3 minutes to take your quiz and I'll see you back here. Don't leave the room, just hang out. But if you need to turn your camera off, feel free to do that. Just if you're willing to turn it back on when you're done, that'd be so great because I love to see faces. 12:18. Cynthia, we just put it in the chat for you. You should be able to click it. As you get your score, your results, and you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, put them in the chat. This is a really good way to help feel, again, some solidarity of like, oh, I'm not the only one with a really high score. So if you're willing, put your score in the chat. And this is not a competition. And let's be honest, if it was, you want a lower score, not a higher score, right? We want low numbers, but that's not the point of this. The point is to see, oh yeah, I'm not the only one struggling here. It's 12:18. If you're still taking it, please continue. 245, 209, 307 or 387, 119. Susan, exactly. You said you're surprised it's not higher. I totally get that. And so this may be one of those moments where you're like, I feel much higher. That's okay. That's when you can start thinking through like, but why do I feel higher? Or what's not on this list? Or what's a thing? And maybe it's a smaller thing, but it's causing you serious anxiety and stress. Just again, a moment to do some self-evaluation. 370, 142, 147. I think I was in a group. I do this training often. I've done it all over the country. And I think I was in a group and I would say more than half the group was over 500. Again, I think stress and anxiety ebbs and flows throughout our year, right? Especially like I work in education. So certain times of the year at work are much more stressful than other times. Or if a new thing has just happened, my husband just started a job 2 weeks ago. It's been high stress. So he quit a job and started a job. That's just high stress for all of us because we're figuring out new routines. But in 6 months, that will no longer be impactful to us. 135, 360, good. So you're like, Jen, what do we do with these numbers? Well, let's look at it. The results, if you have 150 points or sorry, let me say, so we discussed that you're evaluating the last 2 years, and Ray and Holmes, basically what they came out with is if your score falls in one of these categories, you're more likely to have some sort of health event related to stress. So if you have 150 points or less, you probably have a relatively low amount of life change and low susceptibility to stress-induced health breakdown. But again, it is not compensating for something that's on a list or something that is on the list but causing you much more stress. 150 to 300 points, it's a 50% chance of a major health breakdown in the next 2 years. If you're 300 points or more, you're at an 80% chance of a health breakdown in the next 2 years. Maybe you're already dealing with health issues, because stress and anxiety, mental health is directly linked to our body health. If you have an autoimmune disease, you may know, right? If I'm highly stressed, it sends me into a flare up. If something in the moment happens that's really stressful, there's an accident or my child gets hurt, or I find something out about my partner, whatever it is, it can cause a flare up because they're linked. So when you think about that over a long period of time where my stress level, my anxiety is high, it is eventually going to start impacting my body. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Yep, Susan, you say I take care of my mom with dementia, and that's not on the list. Highly stressful. Caretaking is incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. My dad has been a long-term health or caretaker of my mom for 25 years. And it has been a lot. And we do some, we step in some, but they're the ones that live together, and caretaking is just, it's a lot. So let's talk about what stress is. Let's talk about what stress is. But before we do that, I want everybody just to take a deep breath with me. So breathe in. Breathe out. Let's do it one more time. Relax your shoulders, your neck, your jaw. Breathe in. Breathe out. I promise you're going to walk away today with some actionable tools to be able to make things better without adding a whole lot to your plate. So what is stress? Let's talk about it. Stress can be defined as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain on our bodies. Stress is your body's response to anything that requires attention or action. For some reason, I always thought stress was a feeling, but it's actually your body's response. There's 3 types of stress that can be categorized in 3 ways. Your first one is internal. We can have internal stress. Ooh, some of you are going to resonate with this. Internal stress. They're primarily self-inflicted, like perfectionism. Give me an emoji, a thumbs up, a smile, something to be like, yes, Jen, I'm a perfectionist. Boop, boop, boop. Julie, I saw that. Thank you. Yes, perfectionism. We can create internal stress from perfectionism, self-imposed expectations, values, those things that we believe we must or we should do. If you come from a high control religion, or you're very involved in a religion, that can be connected. I was a preacher's kid. Internalized stress. So I get it. So that's one of our stressors, internal. If you're a people pleaser, some of that is connected to that perfectionism and that internalized stress. Okay, the second piece is external interpersonal stress. External interpersonal stress has to do with relationship, your interaction with others. So it could be a spouse, a partner, your kids, a parent, friends, coworkers, bosses, any sort of tension, disagreements, conflicts, arguments, any of that can cause some serious stress. And depending on the closeness, both in proximity and relationship, can have a heavier weight. Especially if that relationship could be tied up with finances or living situations or I don't know, traveling, like because then it's multifaceted. So you have your external interpersonal, and then you have your external impersonal, and the external impersonal are environmental. So thinking about Floridians getting ready to go, they're in the middle of a hurricane right now, right? They are in the middle of some external impersonal types of stress, natural disasters, wars, random acts of violence, big picture, like political, economic circumstances. If you identify with a certain people group and that people group is consistently oppressed, they're consistently, there's danger towards them, it's in the news all of the time, you're constantly being poked at by it all of the time, that's going to cause external impersonal. And there might still also be some external interpersonal involved in that as well as internal. It's all connected. So in the chat, I want you to tell me, looking at these, when you think about your stress and where you're at right now, which type of stress are you at? And you can put internal, interpersonal, or impersonal. Where are you at? What's your main source of stress right now? And if you're like all 3, put that in the chat. All 3, Jen. I'm stressed in every facet. Internal, kind of all 3. Yeah, Cindy, I feel that. Interpersonal, mostly internal and interpersonal. Relationships are hard. They don't always have to be, but even the good ones can still be difficult sometimes, right? External, impersonal, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. We have a lot of political stuff going on right now, and that can feel really heavy and overwhelming, right? And so, and again, this is one of those times where we can look at that and say, you know, in 6 months, I won't be feeling as stressed maybe about something that's going on currently right now. But right now, it's heavy and it's a lot. Internal and impersonal. Julie says, I agree with kind of all 3, and then external and interpersonal. Yeah. Hey, so solidarity, because you got a lot of people that are feeling the same things that you are. So tell me in the chat now, how do you respond when you're stressed? Like, what's your go-to? For me, I'm a pretty patient person until I'm stressed or anxious. And then I'm a lot less, because, you know, we have a reservoir. We have a reservoir of like patience. But as things get too heavy and stressed, our reservoir shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until we don't have a lot to draw from. And as soon as something happens that we would normally have patience for, at least for me, as soon as something happens that I would have patience for, but I'm stressed, I am not patient. I am no longer patient, right? So how do you respond? What's your response when you're stressed? Is it lack of sleep? Mine's a spinning brain at 3 a.m. in the morning. If I'm anxious about something, stressed, I'm awake at 3, thinking about it, spinning on it. Maybe it's not eating, maybe it's overeating, maybe it's neck tension, shoulder tension. Tell me in the chat, what's your thing? How do you respond when you're stressed? Maybe it's anger. Sick stomach and racing thoughts. Yeah, Susan, thanks for kicking us off with that vulnerability. I appreciate it. Sleeping, anger. Mine is like a mixture between lack of patience and anger. Not sleeping, overeating. Yeah, I feel that. For sure. And what's weird to me is that sometimes my body is acting stressed, but my brain doesn't know why. Like I don't have an identifiable, like, this is what I'm stressed about. But I wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm kind of spinning on 23 different topics, but I'm like, I don't feel stressed about all of that. But my body is absolutely showing signs of stress. That can happen. Overeating, anger, yeah. All of those are super common. So transitioning into talking about it around work, let's go into it. Lack of sleep, yeah, I agree. So what kind of things can bring us stress at work? We're going to go through all of these. Be thinking about what are the ones that I can identify with the most. Maybe you have a career concern. Maybe you're thinking about changing careers, or the career you're in isn't making you enough money. Role ambiguity. You're like, what do I do? What am I doing? We have I work in HR, and we have a retreat next week that I'm heading up. But one of the ways we're introducing our team is to we're doing it from a wizard theme. One of my teammates came up with this idea, a wizard theme. And it's basically you put your role into ChatGPT and say, hey, give me like a wizarding role using enchantment and chanting words and things like that. It's really fun. They've got a whole PowerPoint. We're going to wear, wizard hats. I love it. But I have a little bit of role ambiguity right now. I'm in a position that was created last year. I walked into it as a new position, and I'm kind of just hitting a bunch of different things. And so as I was writing this thing using ChatGPT, I'm like, I don't actually know if this is correct. I'm not really sure what words to hone in on here, because I know my job title. I just looked at my job description and I'm still not feeling like this is hitting home. That can feel stressful. Rotating work shifts. My husband worked in the hospital for 15 years. He worked the night shift for many of our first years of marriage. And he was on a flex team, so we didn't always know when he was going to be working. And our schedule changed all the time. And managing that, I have 2 small kids, managing all that was indeed stressful. Role conflict. Do I do that? Do you do that? Whose role is that? That can cause tension. Occupational demands. The things you're doing is hard work. It's just hard. It's physically hard or mentally hard. You're constantly having to be on all the time. Lack of participation in decision making. Maybe you're in a role, and this can happen in family too, right? But maybe you're in a role where you're supposed to be making the decisions, like that's your job, but you make the decision and then the higher ups overrule that decision. They make a different decision. That can be really difficult. Or people are making decisions for you that impact you, but they don't really understand the impact because it doesn't impact them. Work overload. You're too busy at work, you have too much, you're never going to get done. Or work underload. And maybe some of you are overloaded, or like, I would love work underload. Give me not enough to do at work. But when you're supposed to be doing 40 hours a week and you're only doing 25 hours a week, even though you're paid salary and you're kind of twiddling your thumbs, it can feel really frustrating, especially if you're a doer or a checklister and you're like, I usually move on to the next thing and I don't have a next thing and I don't know what to do, but I'm feeling useless. That can feel really stressful. Poor working conditions. Things are not safe. People are not safe. The environment is not safe. Lack of group cohesiveness. Maybe you're a project manager or you're on a team and it is just not, like, you're not gelling well together. Interpersonal and intergroup conflict. In fact, it's not gelling so much that we are in constant conflict all the time. Who's doing what? Why are they doing that? I don't want to do it that way. It needs to be done this way. That's my job. That's not your job. Or please stop telling me what to do. Conflict. Organizational changes, maybe your company is going, or your business is going through a RIF. People are being laid off or restructuring. Maybe you're getting a new leader in and they're changing mission, or changing the workflow or the structure, your team's getting moved around. And then a lack of social support, and that can include both in your setting of your workplace, where it's really difficult to feel engaged and connected to your coworkers, team, boss, and or social from an outward perspective, where maybe there is something that's happening in our country that is deeply impactful to you as a human, and no one's talking about it at work. It's not being addressed, and you can barely like move forward because this thing is so impactful to you and it seems like nobody cares. That can cause anxiety. All right, I'm going to ask you to do it again in the chat. Looking at these reasons for stress, what's the one or two that you identify with? Or maybe there's nothing, it's not on this list, it's something else. Tell me in the chat, what's something you identify with? Work overload. I keep wanting to say overlord, which is not the same thing. Work overload. Work overload. Yep. That seems to be a really common one. Role ambiguity and work underload. That's Joyce. Those are both really hard for sure. Organizational changes. Role conflict. Work underload. Jose, I see that. Need more clients. Sure. And especially if your pay is linked to the amount of work that you have, that can feel, oh, because then it's hitting you on a couple of different levels, right? Overload, work changes, overload. Yeah. Sometimes we're just really busy at work. And we're going to talk about some of this, come back to boundaries, talk about a lot of us who are struggling with work overload and never getting everything done. Great. Thanks for sharing. So we've talked about what stress is. We've talked about reasons for stress at work. And again, a lot of these can apply to our personal lives as well. Let's talk about the impact. What's the impact of stress? Well, it can have physical impact, it can have emotional impact, it can have mental impact, it can impact your work, and it can create unhealthy behaviors. So 44% of employees experience physical fatigue from work-related stress. Physical fatigue is the most common, but we also have cognitive weariness, emotional exhaustion, lack of interest, motivation, energy, lack of effort at work. 89% of Americans have suffered from burnout within the last year. Solidarity, put solidarity in the chat, give me a thumbs up, give me a wave, something if you're like, yes, I have experienced burnout at work in the last year. I will say yes, absolutely. Anybody else with me? Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Like, it's just a lot. And you know, maybe you're like, what is burnout? It's that physical fatigue, cognitive weariness, emotional exhaustion, lack of interest, lack of effort at work. Yeah, so many of us. Physical symptoms of stress, and I want you to tell me if you identify with any of these. Chest pain, feeling like your heart is racing, aches and pains that you're like, that didn't happen before. And it is hard to differentiate if it's older age, right? Or from work. I turn 45 next week. And I can like remember when I turned 35, there was a big change in how my body functioned. There was a big change at 40. And I'm really hoping it's not going to happen again at 45, because I don't want to take much more, right? Because I already have enough. And but some of that is caused by stress. And so identifying, hey, is this stress and anxiety, or is this a health issue that I need to, well, all of them need to be figured out, right? Exhaustion, trouble sleeping, headaches, dizziness or shaking, high blood pressure, muscle tension or jaw clenching, stomach or digestive issues, trouble having sex, weak immune system. That's a lot. So in the chat, tell me what's one thing you're like, yes, my body absolutely does this. For me, if I'm really stressed, this new thing that started in the last 3 months is jaw clenching, where I have to like, I notice I'm doing this, and it will sometimes, one day of jaw clenching will mess up my jaw for a week. It's the worst. What's the thing for you? Chest pain, broken bones, yeah, getting sick, high blood pressure, stomach, poor sleep, shoulders and chest tension, yes. Me too. And in fact, if you need to just take a minute to like push your shoulders back and down, just to kind of like release some of that right there. Maybe rotate your shoulders for a second. Take a deep breath. Feels good. Jaw clenching, back pain, tingling fingers. That can often come from bunched up muscles that are really tight, will eventually start impacting nerves. Tingling fingers, yeah. Stress can lead to emotional and mental symptoms like anxiety or irritability, depression, panic attacks, sadness. Absolutely. If you have chronic stress, sometimes that can lead to unhealthy behaviors like drinking too much, gambling too much, overeating or undereating, developing an eating disorder, compulsivity in sex, TikTok, shopping, really anything that helps us forget where we're at. Maybe it's reading books. You're like, I love to read. I could read 50 hours a week. Cool. Love that for you. And also, are you using it as a coping mechanism? And that's when we start to need to think about, okay, is this a healthy way that I'm de-stressing, or am I using it as a coping mechanism to get through life right now? And those are two different things. So starting to think through, is this healthy, or am I pretending like the world isn't happening by doing this thing? Cheek biting, stomach, blood pressure. Yeah, I'm just looking in the chat again. And then at work, it's difficult to pay attention. You're feeling overwhelmed, maybe even by little things. Your brain is spinning at night. You can't focus, or you can't remember things. My last semester was really busy with really good things. I graduated my master's, finished a couple of classes. We moved into a great apartment. We went on some really fun trips, but it brought on some new team members, like some really good things. And also it was a lot. And so I spent a lot of my summer kind of in a fog at work and really struggled. And so thinking through, is my anxiety and stress impacting my work? Yeah, probably. How is it? So I've set us all up, right? We talked about, are we stressed? What is stress? How does stress impact us at work? Like what brings us stress at work? And then how does stress impact us? So how do we combat stress? How do we do it? All right, I'm going to talk about the first one. If you take away nothing else from this conversation, this next slide is the one. But let me go back to this and say, how do we combat stress? We have to be intentional. We have to be intentional. It is not magically going to happen. Well, when this finishes, then I won't be stressed anymore. Here's the thing. Once we've been in survival mode or stress mode, our bodies have a really hard time leaving that mode. And so when one stressful thing ends, it's almost guaranteed that our bodies and our minds will find something else to latch onto, to be anxious about and stressed about, to repeat that cycle, because that's what it's known and that's what it's comfortable with. So removing stress, bringing our anxiety down, has to be intentional. So the first thing is, if you take nothing else away, I want you to pay attention to this next slide. And this, we're going to talk about it from a work reference, but definitely think about, I need to work on this personally as well. The first one is set boundaries. So many of you at the beginning talked about, I really struggle with boundaries. Yes, because it can feel really difficult to set boundaries. But the first one here is, no is a complete sentence. Jen, I could never say no at work. My boss comes to me with work and I have to just say no. Well, let's talk about it. But first you need to be thinking about, why do I always say yes? What's my reasoning? Am I a people pleaser? And I get it. That sounded judgmental when I said that. I'm not judging. I'm not judging, because I am working on not being a people pleaser. Because I've learned and I've realized that when I live in that people pleasing mode, I don't have a lot to give to those people who are most important in my life. If I'm so busy meeting the needs for everyone at work, and I'm so exhausted from my stuff that I'm investing in at work, by the time I get home, I'm tired. I don't have a whole lot more to give, except for those are the people that I want to give to. Those are the people that I care about. So thinking about, I got to make sure I put work in its correct place. It is not the be all end all. Do I need it to pay my bills? Yes, absolutely. And also, I want to give my very best to my family, my friends, my pets, my own personal life, myself, my very best for that. So how can I come to work, do the work, be all in when I'm there, and be able to leave it in a way at the end of the day or the weekend and go home and fully live my best life with my family, friends, pets, myself? How can I do that? The first one is no, saying no. How do I say no, Jen? How do I do that? Let's talk about some phrasing. This is that moment. And if you need to write it down, get ready to write down. Somebody comes to you at work and says, hey, listen, I'd love for you to be involved in this project, or can you help me with this? This is what you can say. You have a couple of options. The first one is say, I love that you asked me. Thank you so much for considering me. I just don't have this space on my plate right now, because you already know it, right? I just don't have this space on my plate right now. I'm just not able to do it. Or the second option is to say, hey, I love that you asked me and it sounds really cool. Let me get back to you. I just need to look at my list of things to do and like my capacity and what's on my plate, and I will get back to you within 24 hours. If you don't hear from me, shoot me an email and I will let you know, okay? And then when they send that email and you've had time to evaluate, you can then say, yes, would love to, or hey, how much time is this gonna take? Now, remember, it's okay to ask questions because you are a full human being worthy of boundaries and love and care and all of those things. So it's okay to say, how long, you know, how much time? At the end of the summer, a group of people asked me to be on a hiring committee. Did I forget to ask them how long it was going to take, like how much of my time was going to take? Yes. Was I happy to be on it? Sure. But if I had known that it was going to take 35 hours of my time over 3 weeks, I would have probably said, I'm so sorry, I can't manage this. 15, sure. 35, absolutely not. So, and it wasn't even for my, like we have several different locations. It wasn't even for my location. I wasn't even involved in it. But so that's a really important question. How much time will this take? If you might have space, but maybe you're like, I don't have space. So then you send an email back and say, hey, thanks so much for asking. I'm just not available to take this on right now. But please keep me in mind for future things because I really love working with you. The idea is we say no, but we put it on a lovely spin of saying, like it's nothing personal. It's not because I don't want to. I literally don't have the capacity to. Okay, that's if you have the option to say no. Are there so many times where we do not have the option to say no? Yes. So what do we do with that? What if our boss or supervisor comes to us and says, hey, I need you to do this thing, or you have to do this thing. This is going to take a lot within you, so you're going to have to do some practicing. But the response is, okay, great. So right now I have these things on my plate. This is what I'm doing. This is the work I'm doing. And I'm not quite sure what can I take off to make this a priority. Or you can even ask, how can I prioritize this in my list of things to do? If they say this is the most important, I need it done in 2 weeks, then you can say, great. What would you like for me to like put to the side until I get this done? Or if, you know, is this a new job duty? Fantastic. How am I rearranging my other things? So you're not saying no, but part of their position, and if you're a supervisor, this applies to you. Part of their position is to manage workflow. And if you're giving more work to somebody, you got to make the rest of it flow, right? And so we only have a certain amount of capacity. Your capacity is not all ending. It is not going on forever. You actually do have boundaries, like of what you're physically capable to do. And if you sign yourself up for more than you're physically capable to do within your hours, within your ability, you are causing yourself undue stress. This takes practice. And it may be a little bit of a culture shift on your team or with your boss, right? But it's so important. Again, if I put my work in the correct place, understanding that it's an important part, but the most important part is myself, my family, my friends, my hobbies, my pets, my home, then I'm more willing to have the conversation of, yes, happy to do it. How can I move things around on my plate? How can I reposition what's important? Or, hey, love that you asked me. Thank you so much. I'm just not available to do it this time, but keep me in mind for future. Anyone have thoughts about that you want to put in the chat? How does that feel? Does it make you feel like, oh, that feels really confrontational? Or like, oh, okay. okay, I think I can do that. Let me tell you, the first time I learned this, I was living overseas. And I was overseeing a program while teaching full-time. I was working in a high school. And I was working like 90 hours a week, traveling nonstop internationally all over the place while teaching full-time, managing a program and traveling for this job. I went into my boss's office because I was like, this is too much. I cannot do this. I go into my boss and I'm like, hey, this is too much. I cannot do this. And she's so good. She's like, oh, but you're so good at it. In fact, I can envision you doing this. You'd be amazing at this other thing. Let me tell you, when I walked out of her office, not only had I not cut down my work schedule, I had actually added an additional responsibility on. I got halfway down the hallway and I was like, what just happened? I had to have another conversation with her. But that was the moment that I really realized, like, hey, it's my responsibility to set some boundaries. It's my responsibility to have those conversations with my boss because they're not going to do it for me. In general, and not even in like a I'm a bad person kind of way, but in general, people will exploit the things that you're willing to let go. So if you're not willing to set boundaries, people will take advantage of that. And again, not because they're horrible people, that's just kind of how our world functions. So if you want to set boundaries, if you want boundaries, you're actually going to have to intentionally set them. I'm looking at the chat. So Cindy says, people pleaser, want to help everyone. That is really hard for me to do. It's going to be a big change. I get it. I promise you, I really do. It is so hard, but remind yourself, I am worth it. My family is worth it. My mental health, my anxiety, my body health is worth it. In the grand scheme of things, me having this conversation to help protect myself, my body, and my life is more important than pleasing people that I go to work with. It's hard to put it in perspective like that, but I promise that's the truth. And it can start with little things. I don't know that I'd go to my boss on Monday of next week and be like, I have to change everything. I'm not doing any of this. I wouldn't do that. But just going to your boss and saying, hey, I love what I do. I love working here. Right now, I'm working like 60, 70 hours a week to get all of my work done. And I'm all in. I want to do this work. Can you help me look at my schedule, look at the things that are on my list, and just see if I need to revamp some things? Maybe it's prioritizing things. I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but I would really love your help. In general, most bosses will sit down and say, oh, and here's the deal. A lot of times supervisors have no idea how much work you're doing. They don't know. They don't know what's on your plate. So it's okay to have that conversation and go in prepared, or say, hey, can we have a meeting about this? You know, this is kind of what I want to talk about. And then go into that meeting prepared, again, from a non-accusatory way. And I really want to support. I want to do my best. I'm feeling a little stretched. Here are, and have the list and how much time you're spending. And they may be able to say, ooh, you're spending 14 hours a week on this? I didn't realize that was going to take that much time. Let's rethink that. Let's take that off your plate. That's not even a part of our strategic plan. Let's reconsider that. Okay. If they don't have that, you do need to be thinking about, like, if my boss doesn't receive this at all, is not receptive at all, you probably know that, and you might be working in a toxic workplace. And then you might have to make some other decisions. But your mental health, your body, your friends, your family, all of that is the most important. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat again. Great solutions to a tough question. Once we master saying no at work, how do we say no at home? I do want to say, so I can define boundaries for you. Boundaries are not telling other people what they can and cannot do. You can't talk to me like that. Well, in fact, they can. What you can say is, if you choose to speak to me that way, I will not stick around. I will be walking away. You can only set boundaries for yourself. This is what I will and won't accept. I do this with my kids all the time. I understand you're upset. You can be angry, but you can't be mean. If you choose to be mean, I will not be in conversation with you until you calm down. Now, again, I don't want them to be in obviously a child situation is a little bit different, but I just had a conversation with a team member recently. I completely understand that you're frustrated. I want to hear those frustrations, but I need you to share them in a way that is still kind and respectful. If you choose not to do that, this is what's going to happen. Sometimes people don't realize they're pushing boundaries because you haven't ever stated your boundaries. Or maybe you and your brain have never actually decided what those are. You know, maybe you have a partner who, instead of putting the dish in the sink, puts it beside the sink, and it makes you like want to, you know, throw something across the room. But we're not going to do that, because we can be angry, but we can't be mean, right? But so maybe your boundary is you have to put that in the sink. That's not a boundary. Your boundary is, okay, I just want to let you know, we've had this conversation multiple times, that it's important that you put your dishes in the sink. For me, I understand I can't tell you what to do, but if you choose not to do that, I will not be washing those dishes. Or I will be placing those dishes on your bed. I had a roommate like that once, where she'd leave stuff all around. It wasn't dishes, but she'd leave her stuff all over, like I'd trip over them, or they'd take up all the seating on the couch or whatever, like extreme. And so we had the conversation, it didn't improve. So I just started putting it all in her room. and then she could deal with it. It eventually got better, but it took a little bit of time. So thinking through, setting boundaries is for me and how I will respond, and what I will receive or not receive, or accept or not accept, not what I'm going to make other people do. The important things in my life are sometimes the hardest to say no to. Then that's when you say, I'm the most important in my life, because if I'm sick, I can't take care of them. I love my kids. I want to do everything for them. But if I don't have time to rest my brain and my body, if I don't have some time to take care of myself, guess what? I'm not a great mom. Guess what? I'm not a great friend, because my anxiety is so high, I'm not sleeping at night. Because my anxiety is so high that I'm carrying stress and tension and don't feel like moving. I'm defeating the purpose. So when I put things in their correct place, are my friends and family the most important to me? Yes. And also, what do I need to do to make sure that I still feel healthy and safe and in a place where I can love on others? And sometimes setting a boundary for myself is the best way that I can love on others, allowing them to push against my boundaries, allowing them to run over me, allowing them to act and treat me any way they want to, is not, it's not loving for me. And it for sure isn't allowing them to love me the way I need to be loved. If you have thoughts on that, put it in the chat. Take vacation and sick days. I cannot tell you how many times people have been like, hey, I'm going to come to this meeting or this training, but I'm not going to turn my camera on, and I'm not really going to participate, but I'm going to listen because I'm sick. Please take your sick days. Please take your sick. If you're a manager of people, model for them that it is okay to take sick days. Most of our jobs allow for some sort of sick leave, sick days. They're there to be used. Okay. Take your vacation days. Enjoy your life. Enjoy your life. Work is not your life. It's an important piece because we need money. Sure. And maybe it's very fulfilling for you. Love that for you. But other parts of your life should be fulfilling too, and they shouldn't suffer at the hand of your work. Don't take work home. Maybe you work from home. I do hybrid. But once your day is up, whatever you need to do, shut down your computer, don't have your apps on your phone, don't answer emails. We use Outlook. So Outlook has a really nice setting where you can write the email and then have it automatically sent out the next day during business hours. So you can get it off your brain, off your plate, but you're not sending stuff outside of work hours. Thinking about taking and not taking your work home, maybe it's mental, you're carrying a mental load. I had a friend who was a therapist, and as she was driving home, she had a certain bridge that she would drive under. And every time she'd drive under that bridge, she would think, all right, I'm closing it up. And that's when she would shut the door, compartmentalize the work, so that she was no longer thinking about it, so that she could then intentionally pick it up the next morning. And then she could focus on what was happening at home when she got there. So figure out ways that you don't have to take work home. Most of us do not work in work that has emergencies. Now we have things that could be a big deal and need to be taken care of, but emergencies, life and death, maybe around pay, but in general, we don't oversee things that are actual emergencies, but we like to function in emergency states. So being mindful, like thinking through, like, is this an actual emergency, or was this just poor planning? And if it's poor planning, I can answer this tomorrow morning. And if you're like, oh, Jen, that feels sticky, put it in your email. Thanks so much for having an automatic response turned on every day at the end of work, where it's bops back to somebody if they email you outside of work hours, and just say, thanks so much for your email. Appreciate it. I will respond to this during my normal working hours, and have that in your automatic reply. My normal working hours are 8 to 5 or whatever. That's setting a boundary without you actually having to have the conversation. Again, I understand supervisors and bosses can be tricky, but, you know, in general, we shouldn't be working extra hours. We shouldn't allow people to exploit our time or our people pleasing or our love of the work, mission mindedness, whatever your reasoning is. So start thinking about how can you slowly begin pulling back from that. Stop checking emails at night, enjoy your weekends, don't overcommit yourself. This is when we go back to, hey, let me get back to you about that. Thank you so much for inviting or asking me. Let me get back to you about that. And for sure, if you're a leader of people, you better be managing your team. Do not commit your team to something until you know what your team's workload. If you know they're already working over capacity, don't say yes, unless it's your boss coming to you. And then that's when you have the conversation with them. Hey, my team is actually over capacity right now. What are some things we can take off or move aside until we get this project or this thing done? Prioritize your workload. Maybe you really struggle with prioritizing. Some people really struggle with prioritizing. Totally get that. So this is when you start having, you know, maybe somebody at your work is really good at streamlining, prioritizing, getting things done quickly, and you struggle with that. This is when you have the conversation with them saying, hey, can you help me with this? Can you sit me down and like go through this? Because I'm struggling making sure I know what's priority. Maybe it's having that conversation with your boss. We kind of talked about that. Don't do things the hard way. If there's something that's taking you 20 hours and somebody else 2 hours, instead of thinking, oh, they must not be doing it right, start thinking, maybe I need some help making things faster, streamlining some things. And then watch your intake. If you have certain things at your job that cause you a lot of stress, but you have to do them, maybe put them at specific times of day. Maybe make sure that you're doing it around times that you have the capacity, your stress levels are lower in the morning. So you have more capacity to do something stressful, then do it then. Watch your news and TikTok and social media intake. Right now, there's a lot of, what's the word? Just a lot of hyper emotive things happening and people feeling certain ways about things. And if that causes you stress and anxiety, take a step back. Take those apps off your phone. Turn them off until whatever, December, if that is going to be helpful for you. But watch your intake. Feel free if you have thoughts about this to put it in the chat. Number 2, self-reflect. So the first one is set boundaries. The second one is self-reflect. You have to know yourself. Hey, I gotta know, my body's feeling really triggered right now. My triggers are, redness creeping up my neck. I'm sweating. I can feel in my chest. My stomach's upset. What are your body's triggers to letting you know that it's feeling stressed? Know what those are. And maybe it's happening in the moment. I'm walking away from work and I'm feeling really, really stressed right now. What's going on? Or maybe it's a trigger of like, this person always causes me extra anxiety. I'm going to work on planning my day around either trying not to run into them so often or having the conversation with them to get things better between us or interacting with them less. Whatever it is, if that person really causes you anxiety, figure out what that is. If a certain part of your work causes anxiety, like pinpoint it and then know your body and figure out your needs. I've got to do this work. I know I have to. It'd be helpful for me if I had 15 minutes before I had to do this to calm my body and my mind, think through, the words I need to say and then do it. Maybe it's making phone calls. I don't really like making phone calls. So before I make a phone call, I talk myself through what I want to say and be ready for that conversation. That helps calm my anxiety in that moment. So knowing what your needs are. Proactively prepare yourself for future challenges. Maybe last year, last minute at a big conference, somebody came to you and said, oh my God, we don't have anybody to speak for this, or they fell through. Can you come speak for us? Can you come to this thing? Or can you come present about your program? And you're like, you knew I was going to need presenting in the program and you're letting me know a day ahead instead of 3 weeks in advance. Ooh. Maybe this year around, you're like, you know what? I'm going to have something ready just in case they come to me. It doesn't take a lot of preparation. I can mostly use what I have last year, but I'm going to prepare for that just in case. And guess what? They came to you. And guess what? It didn't stress you out because you were ready, because you planned for that possible future thing. The next one is self-compassion. Self-compassion. This one can be really hard, but so important. Stop judging and evaluating yourself. Oh, that went really awful. Jen, you did a horrible job on that. What we're not going to do is talk to ourselves in a way that we would never say out loud to somebody else. Okay, that did not go well, but guess what? You're not perfect. Are there some lessons to learn? Yes. I'm gonna take a little bit and then I'm gonna come back to it and write down the lessons that I need to, like I've learned, reflect on what I can do better next time. But I'm gonna recognize that I'm not perfect. And that sometimes people are not gonna be happy with me and there's nothing I can do about it. Or I can apologize and say, hey, I'll do better next time. I'm really sorry. Take responsibility and move on. I am not going to spin over this. Treat yourself with the same kindness, caring, compassion you would show a good friend or a stranger. This is a big one. Showing yourself compassion of like, hey, it's okay. I did okay. Or you know what, Jen, I can say no. I'm worth it. I matter. Like I'm important. I can say no to this. And then say no. Stop trying to label yourself as good or bad. Because you're not. You're just a person doing the best that you can. You're learning along the way. It doesn't matter if you've been in this job, this life for 55 years. It doesn't matter. 60 years, 100 years. You're still, every moment you're experiencing is the first time you've ever experienced it. Remind yourself that you're just doing the best you can. And if something didn't go well, okay, so next time I know how to make it better. I'm a firm believer that people want to do a good job. They want to do well. They want to be successful. They want to succeed. And if somebody doesn't do well, if they are not able to succeed, it is because there's a gap. They're missing something. There's a tool, resource, knowledge, something internal tool, resource, knowledge that they're missing. And that's why something isn't going well. That's why they're not doing well, you know, and it could be a mental health issue. Maybe you're really good at blank, but you're really struggling right now. And it's because internally you're really struggling with your mental health. So in this moment, there's this gap. How can I fill this gap? What can I do to make things better? I spent an hour this week talking with my therapist about, okay, I have this thing happening at work. It is causing me major anxiety. I need tools on how to get through it because I have to get through it. I have to do the thing. Help me figure out how to do it. And I teach about emotional intelligence. I talk about this stuff all the time. And I'm still struggling. And I just needed another human to validate it and to help me do some game planning. We're not good, we're not bad, we're just humans living our life. And then address this imposter syndrome. And if you're not familiar with what this term is, it's this idea of if anybody knew the real me, they would know I don't belong here, whether it's personal or professional. If they knew actually this about me, they would not want to be here. Here's the deal. You are where you are because that's where you are. You were chosen to be there. You worked to get there. You took steps forward and there it is. Love that. You're not an imposter. Now, maybe you're a person who doesn't know everything yet, but guess what? Live intentionally on learning those things and it's fine, but you're not an imposter. Do not allow that self-speak inside your brain. Stop judging and evaluating yourself. Speak kindness. I'm not an imposter. I just don't know yet, but I'm learning. And in 3 months, I will not be in the same place that I'm in now. And I have to remember, I am constantly growing. It's going to get better. Positive self-thoughts. Again, any thoughts on this you want to put in the chat? I know we spent a lot of time on that first one and it's because it's such a big one, but these other two are so important. I'm going to keep moving on, but if you have thoughts to put in the chat, feel free to put it in there, okay? And then the last one is self-care. I think a lot of times people think self-care is like, ooh, bubble bath and lights and little candle lights and flowers for myself. Can that be some self-care? Sure, absolutely. But the World Health Organization actually has a definition of self-care. It's the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. It is this holistic care for your entire body. And in fact, yourself, your families, and communities. It's holistic. Self-care is not synonymous with self-indulgence or selfishness. Self-care means taking care of yourself so that you can be healthy, you can be well, you can do your job, you can help and care for others, and you can do all the things you need to and want to accomplish in a day. Doesn't that sound magical? Except it doesn't need to be magical. It's really doing the prioritizing, that positive, kind self-talk, setting really good boundaries, being so compassionate to myself and to others, and then taking care of myself. So I'm gonna show you, sorry about that. I'm gonna show you, this is a self-care wheel. There are 6 parts of us that make us up whole. There's psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional, and physical. And all of these parts make up who we are, and they're all important parts of us. And under each of these, it gives a list of things that you can do to help really lean into self-care. But self-care isn't just about bubble baths. It's about going to a therapist, or taking mental health medications, or going to the dentist, or making sure you have really good, solid childcare for your kid, or paying off that debt, or living in a safe place, or putting your feet in the grass for a little bit, being under and in the sunshine, drinking a really good cup of tea or coffee, having a beautiful conversation with a close friend who just gets you. Those are all self-care. And so it can be something little like a coffee date, or something big like I'm going to have gastric sleeve surgery, weight loss surgery, because I can't, my body right now is just too difficult. And I'm speaking from experience. 3 years ago, I had weight loss surgery because I wanted to be healthier for my kids. And I have really struggled with food my whole life. I've been overweight my whole life. I lost a bunch of weight, had some health issues, gained a lot of it back. And I just was like, I got to do something. And so for my own self-care, that's a choice I made. That's what I needed to do. So it can be something really big or something small, but guess what? It's intentional. I'm being intentional. Now, do not let this overwhelm you. If you look at this and you're like, Jen, I'm already maxed out. I do not have any more capacity. Totally get that. It may just be a small thing like putting the blurb in your email. Hey, thanks, I'll get back to you during my working hours. It may be walking away from your desk at lunchtime to go for a walk, or to move away from your computer and watch TikToks while you eat, watch your next episode of your show while you eat your lunch, shutting things down. Maybe it's just going on a walk, and instead of calling someone or talking to someone, it's just processing through your day. How am I? Where am I at? Oh, I'm feeling a little bit of stress. What am I stressed about? Okay. Instead of just like cycling on this, spinning on this, what can I do to make this better? I think it's time for me to have a conversation. Or I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm just going to do the next thing on my list. 10 minutes. I think some of us have this mindset that we have to complete all of our work before we go home. And let me just say, no, that's just not possible sometimes, specifically in certain types of work. Sometimes you're just not going to be able to complete everything before you go home. So that's when we say, okay, I'm going to complete what I can while I can. I'm going to do a good job. I'm all in. And then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go home and enjoy my life. I'm not staying until 7 o'clock anymore, because I want to spend my evening with my family, who in the grand scheme of life is the most important piece. Or I'm going to go home, and I'm going to say hello to my family. I'm going to have dinner with everybody. And then we're going to have 30 minutes of quiet time so that I can have 30 minutes of quiet time, right? Or I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with my spouse and say, this is what I need. This is what I'm going to be doing. Or can we come on the same page? Of course, you're not gonna be like, this is what I'm doing, but have the conversation and say, this is what I need. And in a healthy relationship, that will be responded to with, okay. But part of it is you really identifying what you need. So this self-care wheel can help you identify. So psychological, some ideas, self-reflection. Maybe it's journaling, drawing, painting, going to a symphony or ballet, or watching something beautiful that's beautiful to you. Write a book. Practice asking and receiving help. People are not going to do it the way you want it to be done or the way you would do it, but it's getting done. And that's better than you doing it all. And you're like, Jen, but it's never as good. Okay. That's okay. It's a start. You got to release some things. Emotional affirmation. And you're like, Jen, I'm so not into all that like affirmation stuff. It's not a thing. It's really important. It's really important. If you're unkind to yourself, it can deeply impact your mental health. You have to be kind to yourself. So giving yourself affirmations, one of the things that I chant often in my life is, I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And then I go back and I'm like, see, I did that hard thing, and I did that hard thing. And Jen, you did that hard thing. I can do hard things when I'm getting ready to walk into a hard thing, whether it's a confrontation, a difficult conversation, completing a hard task, whatever it is. And that can be personal or professional. Often I use it at home. In my personal life, I can do hard things. So that's me reminding myself. And also these are the hard things that I've done because I can look back on them as proof, because sometimes we're in the moment. It's really hard to remember. Can I really do hard things? Yes, I have them right here. Maybe it's writing them down. Laughing, saying I love you, watch a funny movie, getting yourself engaged, your body engaged in emotional work can sometimes help you release some of that emotion that you've been carrying. Spiritual, that doesn't mean religious. It can mean religious, but it doesn't have to mean that. It can mean put your feet in the grass and enjoy the sunshine until, you know, the grass dies for winter. But we have a free garden that we can go to just about 15 minutes from our house. It's beautiful lawn, beautiful trees. It's just lovely. And we'll go and the kids will roll, because we live in an apartment complex. The kids will go roll around the grass. My husband and I will lay down the grass and just look at the blue sky and, you know, just play with the grass for a little while, just to kind of center and ground ourselves. But maybe for you, it's playing with your kids, going to the ocean if you're near the ocean. But playing or singing or dancing, maybe you're musical and you just haven't gotten your instrument out lately, or you haven't sat at the piano because you've been too busy. Finding something that helps you with your self-care is just as important as almost anything else, because it recharges us. Maybe you're like, yeah, but you know, I binge watch my shows. Let me make it clear. Resting is not always the same as recharging. If you, for a weekend, you're like, I did nothing but sit on my couch and couch rot and watch my Netflix, binge on Netflix, and I'm still feeling very anxious on Monday, it may be speaking to your fact that was actually not recharging to you. For me, I remember when I lived overseas, I remember a friend saying like that exact thing. She would like couch rot all weekend and still be exhausted the next day. And something in my brain really connected for me, because I at the time was doing a lot of hiking in the mountains, which is not restful at all, but it was recharging to me, because I was spending time out in nature and blue skies and doing things alone, and where I lived was very, very, very busy with millions and millions of people. So I was always surrounded, and I was a foreigner and often like a show for them. And so I was able to climb these mountains and have a moment. It just was so recharging to me. It gave me so much energy. So making sure identifying things that aren't just like, oh, this is restful, it's actually recharging for you. Personal, learn who you are, do some deep self-reflection. You might need someone to guide you through that. Grow your emotional intelligence. Some of these things have to be done intentionally. None of this is just going to happen. Foster a friendship, go on dates, get coffee with a friend, write a poem. Professional, take your time for lunch. Leave work at work. Do not work during your time off. Take mental health days if you have them available to you. If you only have sick days, take a sick day. I tell my employees, I'm like, you don't have to tell me why you're taking off unless it's going to be long-term or there's something bigger going on. In general, hey, I'm out sick today. Okay. Physical, of course, safe housing, but regular medical care. Maybe you're like, I hate going to the doctor. I understand that. But avoiding it doesn't actually make it better, right? Like, you got to get there. You got to go in. You got to have the things. And instead of having anxiety about something that's going on in your body, get the answers. Take time off. Go get a massage. Have a bubble bath. But be intentional. Like, this is my self-care. I am doing this to recharge. And if after you've done it, you're like, this, I don't feel recharged, then it's time to consider what else can I do that might help me. Maybe it's running up a mountain. Last weekend, I was at a conference. We were like, what are you passionate about? And he's like, oh, I love to go for runs on the weekend up in the mountains. And I'm just like, that is amazing. It sounds like absolute torture to me, but I love that for you. you do that. So really identifying what you need to do. And you're like, hey, Jen, I'm in the thick of it with kids or with a sick parent or some other stage of life. Then within the context that you have, finding something. And it may not be the best thing that you've ever done. It may not meet all of the needs, but it could meet some of your needs. It could be something. Maybe if you have a sick parent, and I understand this, but maybe it's taking them with you on a walk in their wheelchair. Little ones, we brought a wagon. We put both of them in a wagon and we would just go. with all of the stuff that we got bigger and bigger wagons as the years went on, just so we could take all the things, because my husband and I knew that we needed this thing. Did the kids get to enjoy it too? Sure. But it was really about us. So within whatever stage of life you're in, really thinking through, okay, what can I do within this? Psychological stuff. Oh, we already did that one. Physical. Anymore. Make sure you're just getting time for you, whatever that means. Any questions? I appreciate in the chat. I'm looking. Love this wheel. The wheel's really good because your thing may not be on here, but it might help bring something to mind. And I do want you to be thinking about it, because you're going to have a couple minutes at the end to put in the chat one thing that you're going to implement. I like that. Recharging. Yeah. Recharging and resting, very different, right? Going to work on not working overtime, because the money's so good working that overtime. It's so good. Get that money in. But guess what? Your health is really important too, and your mental health, and your joy and fulfillment in life is really important too. So you may be bringing in all that money, but if you don't have time for anything else, that's when we need to start thinking, like, is this the most important thing? What do I need to readjust? Maybe it's doing overtime 1 day a week. So I'm getting a little bit of money, but I'm also living my best life, right? So something to consider: ways to improve self-care at work. Put time on your calendar and honor it. Put meeting on your calendar for every lunch break. If you get 15-minute breaks because you're hourly, put them on your calendar and honor it. Do not allow people to schedule during those times. Hey, I'm so sorry, I'm busy during that time. You don't have to tell them you're busy having your lunch. It's put that time on your calendar. Maybe it's you've got this really difficult project that you're avoiding. Put it on your calendar. Set that time aside so you have to face it. I'm in that right now. I have one specific thing that I'm really struggling with, putting time on my calendar and having people hold me accountable. Because literally the sole purpose that I'm doing all of this is to reduce my own anxiety and stress. Sure, I want to complete the project, but it's mostly I have to complete the project. I'm struggling with completing the project for my own mental health sake. I've got to focus on this, and I'm going to implement these tools to get it done for myself so I can get it off my plate and be done with it. I'm tired of worrying about it. Take breaks during the day, even if it's just a quick stroll, you know, do a double.
We'll give Jen a minute. It looks like her computer is frozen. She might have to log off and back on, but we'll give her a minute. Yeah, so she had to log off. She'll be logging back on.
Y'all, I lost you. I'm so sorry. Hopefully you can hear and see me now.
Let me get you here.
Mary, are you there?
There you go. You're
Can you hear me okay?
spotlighted again, and you can
Okay.
share. It's all good.
Perfect. Can you see my screen? Is everything set up?
No, you need to share it
Or do I
again.
need to reshare? All right, give me 1 second. Sorry, y'all. I don't know what happened there.
Technology is fun.
Well, and the problem with this is that I didn't know that I wasn't sharing until I have no idea how long I talked to y'all before you were like, hey.
No, you were on tape breaks during the day.
Okay, perfect. Let me just switch. Hold on 1 second. Nope, that's not what I want to do. I can do this. Okay. So sorry about that. Can you all see what I'm seeing? You're good?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. So take breaks during the day, schedule a meeting with your boss. Have the conversation with them. I need to prioritize. I have an employee that meets with me about once a month and just says, hey, Jen, I have all these things on my plate and I'm really struggling with how to prioritize. Can you just go through the list with me? Yeah, let's go through it. Perfect, because her workload changes often. And this can happen at home too. I'm feeling really overwhelmed with 17 things, but what's the one thing I can do today? What are the 4 things I can get done this week? Prioritize those things and work on them to get them knocked out. Evaluate your workload. Does it all need to get done? Maybe it's having a conversation with your boss about, hey, I'm working 60 hours a week. I know that's not how much I'm supposed to be working. Can you help me figure out what I need to take off of my plate? Here's another one. Consider your office or your desk area. Does it bring you peace or stress? If you're always having to make do and you're hunched over because you've got an uncomfortable chair, or your office is a mess, or you've got noisy people that are around you, start thinking about, how can I make this better? And maybe it's, I wear earplugs at work or headphones at work. Maybe it's, I bring in decorations to make my office feel nice because it's important to me to work in a nice place, in a clean place. Maybe it's getting a system organized so that you are able to like function better. I was 3 years into from the pandemic before I was like, my office space at home is not working for me. So do what you need to do. Listen to me when I say this. You are important. You as an individual, as a human being, not because of what you do, not because of the impact you make or the saying yes all the time. You are important because you are you, and you are here on this planet. It is worth it to prioritize your life so that you are able to live your very best life, whatever that looks like, within the context that you have to live. Lisa says, I'm hearing that you are saying being intentional means saying, why are we doing something? Yeah. Why am I spending 60 hours a week? I'm getting paid for 40. Why am I letting this person completely stress me out? Does that need to be happening? Is there a way I can readjust? What changes can I make? So here's the blank wheel. You've had some time to ponder. What I don't want you to take away from this is like, oh my God, I have so many things I have to work on. That may be true, but that's not what you're going to do today. Today, you're going to focus on one thing. What's one thing that can make your life easier? Just one thing that can make your life easier, that can make your life better. Is it saying no? Is it putting something in your email? Is it going for consistent walks? And a lot of people are like, I'm going to exercise every day. Okay, great. But is that actually doable within the life that you lead right now? Do not set yourself up for failure with your self-care from the get-go. It will not be a positive experience. Choose something that you know you can be successful at it because it's easy. It doesn't have to be the most impactful thing. Maybe down the road, you really do need to start exercising every day. But today, maybe it's just taking your lunch breaks. Putting it on your calendar and taking your lunch breaks. That's what you can implement. So in the chat, tell me one thing that you're like, this is the one thing. And you may have 20 that you're like, yes, I can implement these. But today, this is the one thing I'm going to implement. This is my action step I'm taking away from this discussion, this workshop. Taking a break at work. Love that, Cindy. I will treat myself with kindness and compassion. Yep, that will make a massive difference in your anxiety level because you're letting it go. You're not holding on to it. Self-reflection, being honest with myself and evaluating what works and what doesn't. And that can be something as simple as your office space to your daily schedule. My husband just got a job. We've had to change our entire morning routine where I'm taking the kids to school every day. And I'm like, we are rushing out the door every day. How can I make this better? I had to evaluate, this isn't working. So now we get snacks and drinks put in our backpacks at night. I have the kids pick out their clothes at night. So in the morning, when 7 a.m. hits, everything is shut down, and TVs, tablets, whatever they're doing, toys, and it's time to get dressed and do these things so you have time for breakfast, and we're just walking calmly out the door instead of rushing and frustrated, right? Because what an awful way to start our day. Finding one thing to be grateful for every day. Yep. Taking walks on my lunch break. I love that. That can be an easy one because you already have that time set aside, hopefully. Put automated messages on text and email. Text, yes, love that. Especially if it's for work. Anybody else want to put in the chat? Anything else? All right, listen, y'all are doing a good work, and it's clear that you want to make some changes, and you need to make changes because your stress, your anxiety is in a place where it's going to could start impacting your physical, your mental health. So let's not let that happen. Let's make some choices. Let's set some boundaries, show self-compassion, do some self-care, know yourself so that you can get to a healthy, holistically healthy place. All right, y'all, this is it for me. In this PowerPoint, oh, let me just say one more thing. I forgot about the slide. If you're a leader of people, and I've kind of said this throughout, if you're a leader of people, model for your employees. Don't send them emails at 8 p.m. at night. Don't send them emails outside of your normal working hours. Even if it's important, set it to go out the next morning during work hours. Same for texts. Don't do it. Again, so few of us actually work in emergency situations. Consider your bias. You're going to have employees that are not going to come to you and be like, hey, can we look and talk through my schedule? They're not going to do it for whatever reason, cultural reasons, past history, past mess at work. And so you as a leader should be going to your employees and saying, hey, how are you doing? Where are you at? How's your workflow? How can I support you? Are things working for you? Have the discussions with your employees and initiate it with them and create the space for them to feel safe enough to come to you and say, I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling with setting boundaries or saying no, or this person asked me this and I don't know what to do. Create the space so that they can have the conversation. And a lot of times that's modeled by vulnerability of you saying, hey, just had a conversation with someone and I actually had to tell them, no, this is kind of how I went about doing it. This is actually something I'm learning in my own life. And here's some language that I use that here, try using this language. All right, this really is the last one, I promise. Here is contact information. Again, it's in the PowerPoint that we sent with you. My LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. But I'm so grateful that you all were here. You're awesome. You're doing a good work. You are worth it. You do matter, not because of anything you do, just because you're alive. Do not forget that. Here's some resources if you need them. Have a wonderful Thursday, almost Friday, almost the weekend. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Jen, very much. What, sorry, what a great presentation. I wish I had seen this 20 years ago. I'll send everyone an email in the next hour with the survey link. The survey is actually, the link is in the chat. I put it in there. And if you have any questions for us, I just put in the Empower Idaho link in the chat, and the slides and recording will be available on the website in a few days. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, Fran and Lindsay, so much. And thank you all for attending. And just remember to do that one thing that we were going to do. Thanks again.